Bristol, Rhode Island, 1978. A yard full of half-built hulls. Workers laying fiberglass by hand, 2 layers thick on each side, joined down the middle with a joint so clean it became an industry reference point. 2 miles away, a different yard was encapsulating a lead keel directly into the hull mold. No bolts, no corrosion pathway, no joint that seawater could find in 30 years. 3,000 miles west, in California, a different builder was doing something else entirely. He was bolting the keel on from underneath, with 2 layers of marine plywood laminated into the stub to hold everything together. That California builder sold more boats than anyone in American history. The Rhode Island yard went bankrupt in 1997. The other Rhode Island yard closed in 1991. The California builder survived until January 6, 2026, when it filed for bankruptcy after 56 years of production. The market spent 40 years treating survival as proof of superiority. This video is about what that assumption cost the average buyer and what is still sitting in slips across the country at a fraction of the price, waiting for someone who did the work. Have you ever passed on a boat because you'd never heard of the builder? Leave it in the comments. I want to know which one. This is what Yachts and Boats covers. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. The Catalina 30 is the most produced 30-foot sailboat in American history. 6,430 hulls were built between 1974 and 2008. The production number is real, and the boat earned its reputation on legitimate terms. It is roomy, it is forgiving, and there are enough of them in the used market that parts, knowledge, and community are everywhere. That is the argument for buying one. The argument against is equally specific. Pre-1988. Catalina 30s, roughly the first 3,300 hulls and covering the majority of what you'll find on the used market, have 2 layers of marine plywood laminated into the keel stub. When water gets in, and water always gets in, the plywood rots. The fiberglass skin delaminates from the core. The keel begins to flex independently of the hull. The visible result is a crack at the leading and trailing edge of the keel joint called the Catalina smile, a name the sailing community coined because it shows up on so many boats that it needed a name. The repair requires pulling the engine. It requires excavating the plywood from inside the bilge and reglassing the cavity to Catalina's own recommended schedule, which the company documented in a multi-step bulletin that runs to several pages. A typical boatyard running this job charges between 3 to 5 days of labor on a boat you paid $18,000 for. Catalina knew about it. The company published the repair procedure themselves. They changed the keel stub construction in 1988 at about hull number 3,300, and the boats built after that do not have the issue. The problem is that buyers shopping the used market are not told which hull numbers are affected before they make an offer. The broker's job is to close the transaction, and identifying a structural issue that kills a deal is not in that incentive. That is not a defect that disqualifies the Catalina 30. It is a documented structural characteristic of the boat's dominant production era, and buyers who know about it can inspect, negotiate, and decide. The problem is that the sheer volume of Catalinas on the market and the familiarity premium that volume generates has been crowding out that question for 40 years. A used sailboat market is not a meritocracy. It is an attention market. The boat with 6,430 hulls and a massive forum community commands more attention than the boat with 385 hulls and a builder that went bankrupt in 1991. Attention converts into asking price. Asking price gets mistaken for value, and the boats with no marketing budget sit at the dock, priced at what the absence of awareness produces, waiting for the buyer who does the arithmetic instead of the search. The 5 boats in this video were built during the same era, priced in the same range on the current used market, and carry none of that specific structural baggage. Their builders are gone. Their names don't come up in the broker's first recommendation. Because nobody is marketing them, nobody is bidding them up. The Pearson 323 is the first one. Pearson Yachts was founded in Bristol, Rhode Island in 1956 by two cousins who started building fiberglass dinghies in a garage. By the time they produced the 323 in 1976, they were one of the largest sailboat builders in the United States. Naval architect Bill Shaw drew the 323 with one deliberate departure from the industry standard of that era. He refused to follow IOR racing rules. The International Offshore Rule was the dominant design guideline of the 1970s, and it pushed builders towards certain hull shapes optimized for rating rather than for actual offshore performance. Shaw ignored it. He built for seaworthiness, practical interior volume, and durability. 385 hulls were completed between 1976 and 1983. The keel on a Pearson 323 is encapsulated directly into the hull mold. There are no keel bolts, there is no corrosion pathway. The lead ballast is sealed inside the fiberglass structure, the same approach Island Packet uses on boats that sell today for $150,000. Pearson was building this into a 32-foot coastal cruiser in 1978 for ordinary buyers. The structural solution is not a compromise. It is more expensive to execute than a bolted-on keel. Pearson built it this way because it was better. Current market, well-maintained examples sell in the $20,000 to $35,000 range, depending on equipment and condition. Entry-level boats, flyable, not project, start at $9,900 to $18,000. The Pearson 323 has a Ted Brewer Comfort Ratio of 33.1. The Brewer Comfort Ratio is the industry's standard metric for measuring motion comfort at sea. The lower the number, the more the boat pounds and rolls in a seaway. Numbers below 20 are lightweight racing boats. Numbers between 20 and 30 are coastal cruisers. Numbers between 30 and 40 are moderate blue water cruising boats. The Catalina 30 sits at approximately 25. The Pearson 323 sits at 33.1. The sailors who bought 323s when everyone on the dock was buying Catalinas did not buy a lesser boat because they couldn't find a better one. The forum record shows what they actually said at the time. I know folks who have gone to Bermuda and the Bahamas in one. That is not a claim that gets made about the Catalina 30 without significant modification to the stock boat. 385 hulls exist. The builder has been gone since 1991. No marketing, no dealer network, no one pulling a commission to recommend it. The price reflects the absence of all three. The second boat is the Ericson 35 Mark II. Ericson yachts operated out of California from the mid-1960s through 1990. The 35 Mark II was designed by Bruce King, the same naval architect who later designed the Ericson 34-2, which Pacific Seacraft continued building after Ericson folded. King drew the 35 Mark II as a performance cruiser that could hold its own in club racing without sacrificing the motion comfort offshore sailors needed on longer passages. Approximately 600 hulls were built between 1969 and 1982. The Ericson 35 Mark II has a Ted Brewer Comfort Ratio of 33.1. Its capsize screening formula value is 1.69. The accepted threshold for offshore use is 2.0, and the lower the number, the safer the boat in a knockdown situation. The Catalina 30's capsize screening value is approximately 2.0, sitting precisely at the threshold. Cruising World reviewed a 1977 Ericson 35 Mark II in 2008 and described the sailing characteristics in terms most production boats of this era would not support. The hull fairly danced through the water. Helm was neutral until wind speeds reached 18 knots. Above that, easing the traveler restored balance. In seas of 4 to 5 feet, the boat tracked with hardly a hand on the wheel. That is not marketing language from a brochure. That is a documented observation from a sailing publication with 50 years of independent boat testing on the water off Southern California. The Ericson owner community is specific about the comparison. Forum threads on ericsonyachts.org information exchange, which has been running for years and contains some of the most technically detailed used boat discussion on the internet, describe buyers who looked at Catalinas, Pearsons and Hunters before arriving at the Ericson. Their consistent finding is this: the joinery is better, the hull lines are more refined, and the sailing performance in real conditions is in a different category from the volume production boats of the same era. One forum member put it bluntly, "The Ericson sails better." Most buyers of Catalina 30s don't care. The difference in handling, speed, and offshore capability is real and measurable. Whether it matters depends entirely on what the buyer intends to do with the boat. Current market, the median asking price across 18 recent listings is $22,500. Active boat trader listings run from $19,900 to $29,000. A Catalina 30 in equivalent condition, mid-1980s before the plywood keel repair, lists at $15,000 to $22,000. The Ericson 35 is 5 feet longer, has a capsize screening value well inside the offshore threshold versus exactly at it, has a comfort ratio 32% higher, and documented self-steering tendency in 4 to 5 foot seas. The two boats list within $5,000 of each other. The crowd hasn't figured this out yet, which is why the price is still there. The Ericson owners, who have been the odd ones out at the marina for 30 years, knew this. They watched Catalinas sell for more money and said nothing, because the argument was in the water, not in the conversation. That number, 1.69 versus 2.0 on the capsize screening formula, is the kind of difference that doesn't matter on a day sail. It is the exact kind of difference that matters on the passage where the conditions get outside the forecast. Now the third boat, and this one requires knowing who designed it before the price makes sense. Ted Brewer is a naval architect based in British Columbia. He spent 5 decades designing offshore cruising sailboats, and one of his tools for evaluating them became so useful that the entire industry adopted it. The Brewer Comfort Ratio, the metric we have been using throughout this video, is his creation. He built the test, and then he designed a boat. The Morgan 382 was produced by Morgan Yachts in Florida from 1977 to 1982. The design then continued as the 383 through 1985 and the 384 through 1986, when Catalina Yachts acquired the company and shut the line down. Nearly 500 hulls of the combined 382, 383, and 384 series were built. At 17,200 pounds displacement, on a waterline of 30 feet 6 inches, the boat sits near the heavy displacement threshold. The ballast-to-displacement ratio is 40%. A ratio of 40% indicates a stiff, powerful boat that can carry sail in conditions where lighter boats are already reefed. The hull is an elongated fin keel with a skeg-attached rudder, an underbody configuration Ted Brewer specifically chose for offshore durability. The design is not a racer adapted for cruising. It is a cruiser that happens to sail fast. Practical Sailor interviewed Brewer directly about the boat he designed. His assessment, a Morgan 382 that passes survey, is capable of cruising just about anywhere. The man who invented the test, his own design. One owner reported surfing the Morgan 383 at 9.6 knots, in winds of 30 knots and 5-foot seas on Chesapeake Bay. Under power, the Perkins 4108 diesel, the most common engine in the series, registers 6.2 knots at 1,600 RPM and burns half a gallon of fuel per hour. Which part surprises you more, that a 38-foot boat from 1979 has better offshore credentials than most modern 35-footers, or that it currently lists for less than a base Catalina 34? Current market on Boat Trader. 5 active listings at $19,900 to $44,900, averaging $32,000. A Catalina 38, comparable hull length, lists at $55,000 to $80,000 depending on year and condition. The Morgan 382 is 8 feet longer than a Catalina 30 and roughly $10,000 less than a Catalina 34. The designer of the Brewer Comfort Ratio built this boat to offshore standards. The price does not reflect that. It reflects the fact that Morgan Yachts ceased to exist in 1986, 40 years ago, and no one has marketed it since. The fourth boat changes the frame entirely. because the builder of the fourth boat designed it and then bought one for himself. Ted Hood is one of the most accomplished figures in American sailing. He designed Courageous, the 12-meter that won the America's Cup in 1974. He founded Hood Sailmakers, one of the dominant loft operations of the 20th century. When he designed the Bristol 35.5 for Bristol yachts in the late 1970s, he made a specific comment about the finished boat that is documented in multiple dealer records. He said, "This one just turned out great. She goes right along, doesn't she?" Then he bought one. Bristol Yachts was based in Bristol, Rhode Island. The company produced conservative, quality-built fiberglass sailboats from the late 1960s until bankruptcy in 1997. Spinsheet reviewed the 35.5 and described the company's construction philosophy in a comparison that is blunt and specific. Bristol Boat Company builds Lincolns, and the Bristol 35.5 may well be the town car of the Bristol line. The hull is solid fiberglass. It is built in two halves and joined down the centerline, a construction method that gives the boat what Practical Sailor described as one of the finest hull-to-deck joints of any production boat of its era. The ballast-to-displacement ratio on the standard fin keel version is 43%. On the centerboard version, 46%. Both numbers indicate a boat that is substantially stiffer than the Catalina 30's ratio of approximately 41%. Displacement is 15,000 pounds. The boat is heavier than a Catalina 34 and carries that weight low, in quality ballast rather than in volume or cabinetry. An owner documented sailing the Bristol 35.5 alongside a friend's boat into 5 to 8 foot swells. The friend's boat pounded so hard they had to slow down. The Bristol maintained speed and motion comfort without change. That account is in a verified brokerage listing, not a forum post, and it is consistent with what the construction numbers predict. Current market on Boat Trader, $32,000 to $57,500. Averaging $44,000 across 5 active listings. The Bristol 35.5 is the most expensive of the 5 boats in this video. It is also the most expensive for a reason that the price does not fully capture. Ted Hood designed it, endorsed it publicly, and bought one. The builder has been gone since 1997. No marketing, no dealer, no active production. The price is the inheritance of 3 decades of silence. The 5th boat is the one that gets overlooked even among the overlooked. Tartan Marine was founded in 1960 in Painesville, Ohio by Charlie Britton. In 1979, they commissioned Sparkman and Stephens, the most decorated naval architecture firm in American sailing, responsible for designs that won the America's Cup 5 consecutive times between 1958 and 1977, to design a 33-foot offshore cruiser. The result was the Tartan 33. 201 hulls were built between 1979 and 1988, making it one of the most carefully produced mid-size cruisers of its era. The hull is hand-laid fiberglass with a balsa core tapered to solid glass at every high-stress area, including the engine bed, the mast step, shroud terminals, through hulls, and the keel sections. Tartan's secondary bonding and filleting of structural members to the hull is, in the direct assessment of Practical Sailor, some of the best that will be found on a production boat of this era. That language matters. Practical Sailor has been independently testing used sailboats for over 50 years. They do not issue that kind of assessment to boats they have not examined closely. The Tartan 33 earned it. The Tartan 33 carries a fractional sloop rig, a fin keel drawing 4.5 feet, and an internally mounted spade rudder. Displacement is 10,000 pounds. Ballast is 4,400 pounds of lead. The engine is a universal diesel delivering 24 horsepower, light for the displacement, but adequate for harbor work on a boat with a clean underbody that sails in conditions where powerboats are already anchored. Sparkman and Stephens designs do not chase fashion. They solve the problem of getting a boat to weather efficiently, tracking straight in a following sea, and surviving conditions outside the forecast. 47 offshore races won on Sparkman and Stephens designed hulls between 1945 and 1980 are not the result of a design philosophy that compromises on structure. The Tartan 33 inherited that methodology applied to a production 33-footer that Tartan built to a construction standard practical sailor put in writing. The buyer, who didn't know the firm's history, bought a Catalina 30 instead. 201 hulls of a Sparkman and Stephens offshore design, built to documented construction standards at the same price as the most common 30-foot boat in American sailing history. Current market, active listings range from $20,000 to $40,000. Well-maintained examples with diesel engines and solid standing rigging run $25,000 to $32,000. The Tartan 33 is the last entry in this video. It is not the last boat that fits this pattern. The era that produced all 5 of these boats, roughly 1965 to 1990, was the last period when American production sailboat builders competed on construction quality for a middle-class buyer. The 1990 luxury tax ended that competition in 36 months. 25,000 boatyard workers lost their jobs. Pearson went bankrupt. Ericson folded. Bristol went under in 1997. The surviving builders came back smaller, building fewer boats at higher prices for a narrower customer. The American production sailboat market was restructured into a premium segment and a used segment, with nothing new being produced at accessible prices. The boats described in this video are what that era left behind. They cannot be replaced. No factory is building a new Pearson 323 or a new Ericson 35 Mark II. The hulls that exist are the entire supply, fixed permanently in 1990 when the conditions that made their construction economically viable were destroyed by a Senate vote that cost the Treasury more in unemployment benefits than it raised in tax revenue. When they are gone, when the owners who age out of sailing sell to buyers who do not, the knowledge of what these boats are and what they cost to build goes with them. The price has not caught up with that reality yet. It will, which brings this back to the price. The Catalina 30 is priced at what 6,430 hulls in active circulation, a large owners association, and continuous forum attention will price it at. The Ericson 35 is priced at what 600 hulls, a disbanded company, and 35 years of diminishing brand recognition will price it at. The Pearson 323 is priced at what 385 hulls and a 1991 bankruptcy will price it at. The Morgan 382 is priced at what a brand absorbed into Catalina in 1985 and immediately discontinued will price it at. None of those prices are a function of what these boats can do in the water. They are a function of how many people searched for each name on Yacht World last Tuesday. Ted Brewer designed the Morgan 382 and assessed it capable of cruising just about anywhere. Bill Shaw built the encapsulated keel into the Pearson 323 when Catalina was still using plywood. Bruce King drew a 35-foot hull that tracked with no hands in 5-foot seas. Ted Hood bought the boat he designed. Sparkman and Stephens put their America's Cup methodology into a production 33-footer that Tartan built to a standard practical sailor documented in specific terms. The sailors who bought these boats when the crowd was buying, Catalinas did not buy them because they settled. They bought them because they read the plans. Every hull in this video is still on the used market. The supply is fixed, the awareness remains low. That gap between what these boats are and what the market charges for them closes the moment the crowd catches up. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, subscribe to Yachts and Boats.